Hey, welcome to week 18. And this week we are looking at the third card in the third chakra, and that is the joy card. And in Spanish, and again, forgive my Spanish, alegría, alegría, maybe. And basically in English, I don't know the direct translation, but I do know this is the joy card. And if we look at her name, the name of the fable is, what is it? The Fable of Dancin Daisy. So Dancin Daisy, as you can see, she's in a celebration. Now, what's interesting about this card, and a couple things I want to say to you about it, is that when I first was working with the cards, I really put Dancin Daisy, ironically, in the second chakra because she was movement and, here we go again, excuse me. She was movement and she is, and that's kind of the second chakra as well. There's many meanings with the second chakra. I'm giving you the most basic idea, but the more you learn about chakra and the more you look into the meaning of chakra, the more you're going to get the depth of what some of this is. But for now, it's not that important because we're looking at specifically your journey and your journey with, I want to say your personal journey with fight or flight, and also your planning and thought process, which is what Dancin Daisy, if you will, the joy card is going to give you. Now, originally she was a second chakra card. If you look at her, you can see there's some orange in there. And then I started to realize that she really belonged in the third chakra. And when I was teaching the original deck a long time ago, people were saying to me, but she's a second chakra, how can you take her out? Well, what happened was when I removed the emotion of joy, if you will, because it's the joy card, from the second chakra of emotion, and I put it into the third chakra as an intellectual part of our journey, it helped, I would say, ground the idea of joy as being something that we can experience as a verb, living into joy, enjoying, being in joy, as opposed to having just an emotion of it that is fleeting like a cloud, but living into planning to live into joy. Remember that fight or flight is like, will you fight for your happiness? Will you, and that's the irony of it, right? Because it's an oxymoron of fighting for happiness. But at the end of the day, we're really taking a stand. And I think that we've used the word fight as an against this energy, when really my sense of it is that it's more about what are we for? What do you stand for? Who are you? And what are you going to take on in the world? So that becomes a very important conversation. The other thing I want to say about the joy card, which is, here it is in the book. You can see it. It says joy, Dancin Daisy. And when we look at the card in the book, you know, people automatically, if they pull this card, they go, oh, it's joy, it's happy. Well, one of the things I want to caution you about with all of the fables, and whenever we're working with this, with any kind of energetic, intuitive awareness, right? When we're working with that, I think it can be so undercutting to say that's a good card or that's a good fable or a good week versus a bad week. It's just information, and it doesn't mean anything without you. So to give you an example, and I'll let you read the fable, I don't want to go into that, but what I do want to say is that, you know, I was doing a reading, and then Joy came up and I talked about it. And then the students were doing readings, because I love it when I give an example and then people practice, right? And so I went around and one of the women said, oh, I got the joy card, and look. And I looked, and I saw some other cards around it. And the reader was saying, yes, and this is you feeling joy. And I didn't say anything. I was just listening. And what came forward to me right away was that the woman who got excited about getting the joy card did not experience joy in her life. she was someone who was busy giving it to everyone else, but had not really experienced it. And I think it was in that moment that I really decided that joy should not be just a feeling. Joy should be a lifestyle. It should be a way of being. It should be the what I was telling you about. It's an action, not a state. And so that was when I recognized that while her hair was red, the daisy itself on her dress, and if you notice, it's on her heart, it becomes that heart chakra also of what's next. If joy is just a fleeting emotion, it's gone. But if joy is something that enters our heart and we allow it to enter our heart, it becomes a way of living. And so I listened to the reading, and one of the things, this is not a commercial for anybody, I just had a cup of water. But one of the things that happened was that when she was looking at it and afterwards, that was when I looked at this woman, and, you know, I'm always concerned about people doing spiritual bypasses, you know, just kind of like skirting over what's really going on. But it was an okay reading. It wasn't as deep as this reader ultimately learned how to be. But at the beginning, you have to just dive in, right? So I gave her some kudos, and I said, good job. Here's some things you did great. And then I said, and I have an inquiry. And they're like, uh-oh, you know, because when I have a question, it's like, oh, I said, my question is to the client. How did you feel about this? And because it was, reader and client. And the client was saying, well, it was okay. I really was happy to see the joy card. And that was when I jumped in as well. And I said, this has helped me really solidify something. And that is that I don't feel that you are someone who has allowed yourself joy. My sense is that you are hell-bent on bringing it to everybody else, and everyone around you feels joy for all the work you do for them. And I knew this from working with this woman a little bit. She was of service and helping out, and really, really makes other people's life joyful. And I said, I wonder what that would look like if you gave it to yourself. And she just said, I don't know. And the I don't know is the most mystical, magical. It's the place where we can open up to our God consciousness. It's the place where we can really be aligned with God and say, yes, I get it. I don't know means I don't have your answer. And I don't know that I have mine. I do know that I'm with you in this moment. And this woman really just kind of sat there, and there was this energy. The reader got it too, and she said, what did I miss? And I said, what were you feeling? And she said, well, I was feeling like a little disconnected, like my instinct was kind of like something's wrong here. And I said to her, say that in the moment. Because let's look at what would happen if you had changed and said, I see that this is a joyful card, but I feel uneasy about it. It doesn't feel genuine to me or authentic, and I'm not quite sure what that means. And the reader said to me, oh my gosh, that's so true. And it's because we were going off the real feelings instead of the intellectual, here's what I think this card means. So the more we look at what's the way we connect to it, the more the message would be directed toward us and through us, and not something we have to do. It's something that comes to us, and it's something we can do to support ourselves and others. So when we look at the joy card, there's a quote here, and it says, let's just jump and see what happens. And actually, that quote is so wonderful, because it's the idea of like, well, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen. And I like when people come to me and they go, I don't know what's going to happen. I said, well, how do you expect me to know? And they're like, but you're this. I go, no. You have the answer. Let's look at what it is. Remember, how we relate to the issue is the issue. Let's look at what's at stake for you in not seeing it, and look what's at stake for you in seeing it. And when we look at something like that, then they can go, I really don't want to know, because he's a cheater and he's been a cheater and he's cheating again. And you see, when my client can say that, or the person I'm working with, it will be a lasting moment because they came to it. If I say that I'm just someone who's involved, and then they can say to me, you're wrong, and you're this, and you're that, and they can once again blame someone else for not giving them the correct prediction, because inevitably that person's going to call them again. Why do I say that? Well, because what's going to happen is when you're in a pattern of personal destruction or trying to heal something, pardon me, when you're in that pattern, it keeps happening. So let's look at the pattern of, I think I'm allergic to you, okay? So let's look at the pattern of joy. Allergic to joy. And let's look at what happens there. So when we look at the message of the week, it says, this week brings us to joy. Dancin Daisy is a contagious energy of joy and gratitude. But many people want to smother their own good feelings. We never really get to know Daisy, do we? Now you're going to find out in the fable that you really don't get to know Daisy, and you'll see why. What we see is the response to her and to joy itself. This week, we'll look at how your thought patterns expand your joy or try to minimize it. And I think that's the biggest part of this whole week, is really saying to you, I want you to be the observer of your response to joy and what that means to you and who you are around that. That's very important in this conversation. Now, obviously my fable's here, but something I want to say too. The Tori's tip, I'm Tori, the tip of the week says, the fable is about the way we mentally process happiness. Think about that. How we respond to an issue is the issue. So if you respond to joy as being, it's so phony, that's the issue, that you see things as phony, whatever that is. Try to observe your thought processes. Are you someone who accepts things at face value, or are you someone who must rip apart what's ever offered to you in order to understand it, in order to feel safe? And part of this work is kind of learning that, you know, yes, we can scientifically explain how an airplane leaves the ground. A 2-ton airplane flies because of, you know, energy and all this, or wind and turbine or whatever, but it's still a miracle. You know, we can explain electricity, but it's still a miracle. So the things that we have around us, and if you look at how miracles started the conversation of the third chakra of yellow, you can really see that yellow in and of itself is the sun. So it is being guided. That third chakra really is the deciding factor for us. And some people who studied the fables brought out to me that there's blue in there, so it's a communication as well. It is a manifesting card. I agree with that, and I think it's really about changing your perspective about what joy means to you, and can you own joy in your own life? So finally, we look at the first impressions, and of course, I already covered this really. It says, and this is basically the I want to say the summation of it in the first impression. Daisy reminds us, Daisy is the card. Daisy reminds us that joy is something we experience, and understanding it does not create the feeling. So it really is a question of the idea between our second and third chakra. Remember I said she moved from second to third chakra. From our feelings into our planning and thought process, that's how we can really create sustainable energy in our life. And I talked about energy a bit. Okay, so your intention for the week is trying to understand that emotion from outside never works. To comprehend a feeling, we must experience it. This week, set an intention to be the observer of what brings you joy. Take at least one moment each day to remember what joy feels like. It could be something as simple as seeing a child laugh, playing with your dog, going for a walk, cuddling with your kitty, watching a movie, or having empowered thoughts. It can be simple. So I'm going to invite you to step into the idea that joy regenerates itself. It's not something that you give out once and it's gone. When we learn to experience it almost like an energy, like our own inner turbine, we become the magnet of it. Remember that a lot of times we give away what we are trying to get. So when we give joy to others, sometimes we're trying to get it for ourselves. When we are joy, we automatically share it with others. That's it for this week. I will see you next week, and you'll have a great week. Make sure you do the exercises if you can. Post below how joy has affected you and how you see joy in your life. Has this conversation shifted you or not? And I'll see you next week.